Imagine waking up one morning and realizing you're not the same person you used to be. You look in the mirror and see the same face, the same eyes, and you hear the same voice, but something feels different. Something inside you has changed. Choices that once seemed impossible now feel okay. The little wrong things you once hated don't seem so bad anymore. You've become someone you once promised you'd never be. What really makes us different from the monsters we judge? Is cruelty only for those who were born evil? Or can anyone, me, you, anyone, step over that invisible line if life pushes us far enough? The truth is scarier than we want to believe. Evil doesn't come from one big choice, but from many small ones. It creeps in quietly, pretending to be something harmless, something easy, something normal, something everyone does. It whispers, just this once. It's no big deal. Everyone does it. Until one day, we realize we've lost sight of what's right and what's wrong. And then we're left with one question. What keeps us from becoming monsters? Or maybe, what fails to keep us from becoming them? This video is a warning that you are not so different from the people you look down on. A warning that, given the right situation, you could become someone you never thought you'd be. Today, we're going to see how normal, kind, and good people can turn into something even they would be afraid of. And, more importantly, we'll learn how to stop that from happening. Because the biggest mistake we can make is believing it could never happen to us. The false sense of goodness. If someone asked you if you were a good person, what would you say? Maybe you'd answer yes. Maybe you believe you'd never hurt anyone on purpose, that you'd never choose to be cruel. That deep down, there's a line you would never cross. But what if I told you that this line isn't as strong as you think? What if I showed you that people just like you, normal, kind, everyday people, have crossed that line before? A psychologist named Philip Zimbardo spent his life studying this question. And in 1971, he decided to test how easily people's sense of right and wrong could be changed. He chose 24 college students, healthy young adults with no criminal past and no mental problems, and put them in an experiment. The idea was simple: to create a fake prison in the basement of Stanford University that would last 2 weeks. The students were split into 2 groups. Half would be guards, and the other half would be prisoners. The prisoners were treated like real criminals from the very beginning. Without warning, they were arrested at home, handcuffed, and taken to the fake prison. Once there, they were stripped of their clothes, sprayed with disinfectant, and given uniforms with numbers instead of names. Their names were gone. They were now just numbers. The guards, however, got uniforms, wooden batons, and dark sunglasses that hid their eyes, and in a way, their humanity. They were told to keep order, but not to use physical violence. But something surprising happened. In only a few days, the guards began to misuse their power. At first, they made up embarrassing rules, like forcing prisoners to say their ID numbers over and over for hours. Then they started taking away food and sleep, keeping the prisoners awake all night as punishment. When the prisoners began to fight back, the guards became crueler in their minds and actions. Some prisoners were locked in tiny dark rooms for hours. Others were made to clean toilets with their bare hands. They were still the same students, but now they had completely changed. The prisoners, on the other hand, started to give in. Many broke down emotionally, while others simply accepted their role without questioning it. In only 6 days, things got so bad that Zimbardo had to end the experiment. 6 days were enough to turn ordinary college students into cruel guards and helpless victims. What does this mean for us? It means that evil isn't something outside of us, meant only for villains. It lives inside each of us, waiting for the right moment to appear. The situations we face can strongly affect how we act, even pushing us to do cruel things. But this change doesn't always happen in obvious ways. Sometimes it's slow, quiet, almost invisible. The writer C.S. Lewis talked about this idea in his book, The Screwtape Letters. The story is written as letters from an old demon named Screwtape to his young nephew, Wormwood. In them, Screwtape doesn't tell his nephew to make humans do terrible things. Instead, he teaches him something far more subtle and powerful: how to distract people from doing what's right. He gives advice like this: make people too busy to think about what's good or bad. Convince them that morals and values don't really matter in daily life. Make them believe that small wrong choices aren't important. And before they realize it, they'll be too far gone to turn back. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Evil doesn't always make us choose between good and bad. It simply tricks us into not thinking about it at all. First, we ignore something wrong because it's not our problem. Then we excuse bad behavior because everyone does it. And soon, we can't even tell where the line between right and wrong used to be. The truth is that all of us can be influenced. What protects us from becoming monsters isn't just our sense of right and wrong. It's our willingness to question things. The problem is, not many people ask questions. And when we stop questioning, we let the world around us shape who we become. That's when good and evil start to look like nothing more than an illusion. Dominion, the way to darkness. Nobody suddenly wakes up one day and decides to be cruel. Evil doesn't appear as a clear, conscious choice. It grows quietly and secretly, inside the small excuses we make for ourselves every day. Losing our sense of right and wrong doesn't happen all at once. It sneaks in slowly, explained away, justified, and ignored. In one of the oldest and most powerful stories ever told, the Mahabharata, there is a man named Karna. He was born for greatness, the son of the sun god, a mighty warrior meant to do amazing things. From the moment he was born, he had magical armor and golden earrings that made him impossible to harm. But before he could even show who he really was, his own mother rejected him and left him by a river. A kind family of coachmen found him and raised him as their own. Even though Karna was strong, smart, and talented, people still looked down on him because of his low birth. He trained harder than anyone. He became a master fighter. But no matter how much he achieved, the world refused to see his worth. Whenever he tried to prove himself, he was laughed at. The rich nobles pushed him away. The great teachers insulted him. Until one day, someone finally noticed him. Prince Duryodhana, the future king of the Kauravas, saw Karna's power, but his kindness wasn't real. It came from selfish motives. Duryodhana wanted a strong friend and fighter on his side. He knew Karna's deep anger and desire for respect would make him loyal to whoever gave him what he always wanted: recognition. So, in a grand public gesture, Duryodhana gave Karna a noble title. For the first time, Karna felt proud. For the first time, he wasn't an outsider. For the first time, he mattered. And in that very moment, he became trapped by his own gratitude. From then on, he promised to follow Duryodhana no matter what, even when the prince began to act with cruelty, even when he plotted against good and innocent people, even when he insulted and humiliated a defenseless woman in one of the most terrible scenes in the Mahabharata. Karna saw everything. He knew it was wrong, but he stayed silent. He told himself he was only being loyal, that keeping his promise was more important than following his heart. Karna's story isn't about an evil man. It's about a good man who slowly lost his way, giving up his morals little by little for something that seemed noble. He didn't see that he was turning into something he once hated, and when he finally understood what he had become, it was too late. We like to think we'd never be like him, that we'd never cross that line. You might be thinking, I'd never do something like that. But would you? If the right situation came along, if the pressure was strong enough, would you still hold on to what you believe in? In the 1960s, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram ran an experiment to find out how far people would go when they were told what to do by someone in authority. The setup was simple. Regular people were asked to act as teachers in a study about learning and memory. They were placed in one room and told to read questions to a student sitting in another room, someone they could hear but not see. Each time the student gave a wrong answer, the teacher had to press a button to give an electric shock as punishment. The shocks started out small, but with every wrong answer, the voltage went up. The machine showed the levels on a scale, from mild shock to danger, severe shock. But there was one key detail. The student wasn't real. He was an actor. The shocks weren't real either. The teachers, however, didn't know that. At first, everything seemed fine. The first shocks were weak, and the teachers followed instructions easily. But as the numbers climbed, the student's screams grew louder and more painful. At 120 volts, he cried out that it hurt. At 150 volts, he shouted that he wanted to leave. At 200 volts, he began to beg for it to stop. At 300 volts, he pounded on the wall, pleading for mercy. And at 330 volts, silence. The teacher froze, unsure what to do. Their hands shook. They looked scared and confused. Had the student fainted? Was he dead? Many begged the scientist to stop the experiment. Some cried, some trembled. But the man in the white lab coat said calmly, "Please continue. The experiment requires that you go on." And most of them did. In fact, 65% of all participants pressed the button all the way up, 450 volts, truly believing they were shocking someone to death. None of them were evil. None of them wanted to hurt anyone, yet they still did it. All because a person with authority told them they had to. Does evil get rewarded? From the time we are little, we are taught that being good is the right way to succeed in life. We hear that if we work hard, stay honest, and treat people fairly, we'll be rewarded in the end. But when we grow up, we find out that the world doesn't always work that way. How many times have you seen someone selfish, dishonest, or mean get ahead, while honest and kind people are left behind? Why is it that in politics, business, and even in friendships, the ones who cheat often rise to the top? The truth that few want to say out loud is that the world often rewards bad behavior. And the big question is, why? If there was one person who understood this harsh truth, it was Niccolo Machiavelli. He lived in the 1500s, during a time of betrayal, secret plots, and bloody wars between the cities of Italy. Kings were poisoned, friends turned into enemies overnight, and whole families were destroyed just for power. Machiavelli noticed something alarming. People who tried to stay moral and fair were usually the first to fall. Leaders who wanted to do the right thing were often betrayed and overthrown. Those who trusted too easily were tricked and killed. Those who played fair lost everything, while the ruthless and clever ones took control. From these lessons, he wrote one of the most talked about books in history, The Prince. It wasn't really a guide on how to be evil, as many think. It was a warning that in the game of power, the winners aren't always the kindest or the most just. They're the ones who know how to use both wisdom and strength. Machiavelli believed that to succeed, being good wasn't enough. You also had to be smart. He wrote something that still makes people uneasy today. Whoever always tries to be good will be destroyed among those who are not. What did he mean by that? He meant that being good alone doesn't protect you. If you think the world will always reward honesty and fairness, you'll end up being fooled, betrayed, or used by those who don't play by the same rules. Machiavelli said a good leader should be like both a lion and a fox. The lion is powerful and earns respect through strength. The fox is clever and survives by using intelligence. If you're only a lion, you'll be tricked. If you're only a fox, you'll be overpowered. But if you can be both, strong and smart, no one will be able to defeat you. And when we look back through history, we can see that Machiavelli wasn't wrong. The most successful leaders often lie without guilt, twist the truth, and manipulate people to get what they want. The bosses of some of the biggest companies in the world take advantage of their workers, bribe governments, and cheat to stay ahead in business. Great military leaders who changed history often use lies and cruelty to win their battles. And when we look at our own lives, we can see the same thing happen again and again. How many times have you seen a cheater get promoted? How many times have you seen a mean person become popular? How many times have you seen someone manipulative succeed while good people get hurt? The truth is that the world isn't ruled only by goodness. It's also ruled by power and strategy. But does that mean being good makes you weak? Does it mean you have to act like the bad ones to win? Not exactly, because Machiavelli never said you should be evil. He said you should be smart. What he really meant was this: be kind, but not foolish. Be fair, but not easy to read. Be honest, but don't always show everything you're thinking. The world isn't a place where the good always come out on top, but that doesn't mean you have to turn cruel to survive. The real secret is to stay good, but to be wise about it. Goodness needs strength and strategy if it's going to have real power. If you want justice, you must understand how injustice works. If you want a better world, you must learn how those who harm it think and act. If you want to win, you must be strong enough not to be crushed. Because what Machiavelli truly taught was this: be a lion, so no one dares to take advantage of you. Be a fox, so no one sees when you're the one in control. And most importantly, never forget, a world where only the bad guys win is simply a world where the good guys never learned how to fight. Is your goodness what you imagine? If someone asked you if you were a good person, you'd probably say yes, right? After all, you follow the rules. You don't hurt anyone on purpose. You believe in fairness and justice. But what if I told you that, in the right situation, you could do things you now think you'd never do? What if I said that inside you, there's already a hidden potential for evil, waiting for the right moment to appear? The psychiatrist Carl Jung called this idea enantiodromia, the belief that when something goes too far in one direction, it eventually turns into its opposite. And this doesn't only happen in the outside world, it happens inside us too. The hero who becomes a dictator, the defender of justice who turns into what he once fought against, the peaceful person who, after years of holding everything in, finally explodes with uncontrollable anger. Enantiodromia is often an unconscious process, something our mind does without us realizing, to try to fix inner imbalance. We might think we're freeing ourselves from conflict, but really, it's just our mind reacting because we haven't truly understood or accepted all parts of who we are. Jung said, "The only person who escapes the hard law of enantiodromia is the one who learns to face their unconscious, not by repressing it because then it only fights back, but by looking at it clearly for what it is." When we become aware that the potential for evil lives inside us, just as it does inside everyone, we are less likely to project it onto others. That means we stop blaming other people for problems that really come from within ourselves. But humans have always preferred to point fingers. Throughout history, people have chosen easy, good versus evil stories, us versus them, instead of accepting that the world, and we ourselves, are far more complicated. The more you see yourself as completely good and just, the easier it becomes to ignore your darker side. And the more you ignore it, the less you notice when it starts to control your actions. History gives us countless examples. In the 20th century, totalitarian regimes rose because millions of people followed ideas that now seem cruel and absurd. At the time, entire nations believed they were doing the right thing, without realizing the evil that was spreading behind those beliefs. Now ask yourself, could your own story also carry a bit of that darkness? Imagine this situation. You wake up in an empty white space with no memories. You don't know who you are, where you came from, or what you've done before. Then a screen appears in front of you. It says, "Create your world." You suddenly realize that you have the power to decide everything about this new world. You can make the laws, choose how money and resources are shared, decide people's rights, and set what kinds of opportunities they'll have. But there's one important detail. Before you're born into the world you create, you won't know who you'll be. You could be born rich or poor. You could be born in a peaceful country or one at war. You could be born male or female, healthy, or with a disability, educated, or without any chance to study. Knowing all this, what kind of rules would you create? This thought experiment is called the Veil of Ignorance, and it was created by the philosopher John Rawls. It teaches us something uncomfortable. When you don't know who you'll be, you tend to choose rules that are fairer for everyone. But what does that say about the world we live in now? And what does it say about us? If we grew up safe, with food, education, and comfort, Are we truly good people? Or have we just never been forced to fight for survival? Because if we had been born on the other side, in poverty, in fear, in pain, would we still be the same people we are today? Think about all the terrible things that have happened in history. The wars, the genocides, the persecutions, the dictatorships. None of these tragedies started because one evil person suddenly decided to do harm. They happened because thousands of normal people like you and me, followed orders without asking questions. Because they truly believed they were doing what was right. Because they found ways to justify their actions. Because they didn't notice when they had already crossed the line. And that is the danger of enantiodromia. The more you refuse to see the darkness within yourself, the stronger it becomes, hiding quietly in your mind. And when it finally comes out, it takes control, and you can't stop it. So the real question we should be asking is, if anyone can cross the line, how can I be sure I haven't already crossed it? That's the question that truly matters. Because the truth is, no one realizes when the change begins. Morality isn't a solid, unbreakable wall. It's like a suspension bridge. It can shake, bend, and weaken with every small decision we make, even when we don't notice it happening. Evil exists even without monsters. It only takes ordinary people who stop asking questions. It only takes someone who, one day, excuses a small lie, and the next day, justifies an unfair act. And by the time they notice, they can no longer tell when they crossed the line. The more we ignore our own darkness, the easier it becomes for it to control us. Carl Jung once said, "No one becomes enlightened by imagining light, but by becoming aware of their darkness." This means that the only way to truly be a good person isn't to pretend you have no dark side. It's to face it. To understand that you are capable of being selfish, cruel, or unfair. And to use that awareness to make better choices and grow as a person. Because the real danger isn't only in following orders without thinking. The real danger is not stopping to ask yourself who you are turning into. So let me ask you, are you sure you're still on the right side of the line? Or have you already started to cross it, without even realizing it? If you can't answer that question, or if it makes you uncomfortable to think about it, it might be because you're still hiding behind your mask. If you want to learn how to take that mask off, click on the video on the screen and watch it now.